Good evening, Michigan. We want to welcome you to this town hall. It's our first town hall titled Giving Parents a Voice. And we titled it that for a good reason. Parents have been silenced, hushed, shamed, bullied, and quieted over the last 2 years. We know that parents are starting to organize and wake up. We know that government has overstepped their bounds from school boards all the way up to state and governors and the federal government. We know that parental rights are under attack, and it is the mission of our Moms for Liberty to help parents unify, educate, and empower. We want them to defend their parental rights at all levels of government. Just last night, I dropped in on the Dearborn School Board meeting. My flight landed. I flew into Detroit, and when I was on my way to driving up here to Troy, and I just saw the exit. I didn't know where Dearborn was located, but I saw the exit that said Dearborn, and so I pulled over because I remember seeing it in the news, and I texted our admin, and I said, "Is there a school board meeting in Dearborn tonight?" And she said, "Yes, they moved it to Thursday night." And here's the address. It was 2 miles from where I was, so I just zipped on down there and popped in. And I was overwhelmed to see all those parents, all those dads. We are Moms for Liberty. We are 100,000 moms across the country, but that building was filled with dads. There was 1,300 dads that fit capacity, and then they had to open the overflow, and there was a couple hundred parents there, and then they opened that overflow. It was amazing. Tiffany and I, the other co-founder of Moms for Liberty, served on school boards for 4 years. And one thing that we noticed while we served is parental engagement was practically zero. Parents have been great, and they're needed in the classroom to bring in cupcakes and help with class parties. It's a wonderful role to play. But it's time that parents get involved in school board policy, in what the direction is of the district. And that's what we saw happening last night in Dearborn, and that's what we're going to start seeing happening all across Michigan and all across the United States. So tonight, we're excited to bring Michigan, your education leaders in the state, to hear your concerns. We are going to have discussions about issues that your state is facing, and then we're going to open up the mics to the crowd and let you ask questions. It's going to be an open and honest conversation. But before we do that, I would like to recognize some special guests here this evening. First of all, we have, I think, 9 chapters here in the state of Michigan. So if you're a chapter chair leading a county in Michigan of a Moms for Liberty chapter, please stand and be recognized. These ladies are on the front lines, really under attack. They are called names, they are shamed, they are bullied, and all they're doing is standing up for children. So give them help when you see them. Give them words of encouragement, please. They need it to build them up after they're beat down all day long. Next, I would like to recognize, I believe we have 2 candidates running for State Board of Education. Yes? Do we have Linda Lee Tarver? Can you stand? And Tammy Carlone, are you here? Ladies, thank you. Running for office is a challenge. Running for a state office is a big challenge. Thank you for putting yourself out there and for going for this big seat. And we're trusting that when you get elected, you will do the right thing for children and families. Are there any school board candidates here running in your local school board? Please stand up if you are. Most important job in the country. We wish you the best of luck. Thank you for putting yourself out there and running for school board during this time when it is under fire all the time. The pressure is high, and Tiffany and I understand what it's like to serve in contentious school boards. As far as elected officials that are not on the stage tonight, is anyone here a current elected official in the state of Michigan? Okay, just wanted to make sure we didn't miss anybody. All right, is there anyone else running for any office in the state that we can recognize you? Please stand.
I'm Ronald Dwyer. I'm running for Oakland County Commission, actually in this district that we're in tonight.
Excellent. And ma'am?
Diane Saber, I'm running for state
Thank you. County Commissioner in Lansing, Michigan. Thank you, sir. And one last one. And we're going to hear from Norm in just a second here. Okay, now I would like to ask you to stand as we hear from Norm Schinkel as he sings the national anthem, and he has asked that we join with him and help him sing the national anthem. When Norm is done, we are going to follow that up with our chapter chair from Oakland County, Katie McFarland. She is going to give us an invocation, and immediately after that, our chapter chair from Isabella County, Bree Morgenberg, is going to give us a Madison Minute.
This song was written by Francis Scott Key 30 years after we became a country, when we were trying to keep ourselves a country in a war of 1812, in a morning after a battle was fought, and the flag still stood. We all know the words, so let's all join in. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watch were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Lord, we thank you for bringing all of us together this evening as we continue to fight for the innocence of kids and parental rights. Please continue to give us strength in carrying out our work, as this was never meant to be easy. We pray for accountability against all those who have and continue to abuse children and families in Michigan. Lord, we ask that you open the eyes of those who are blind to wake up to the reality of the harm that is being done to our children in the public school system. May you grant the people of Michigan the wisdom to elect strong leaders who understand that children belong to their families and not society. And Lord, please be a constant reminder to us that as many beatings as we may face, we know we've already won, as we have God and the truth on our side. Amen.
Should I keep back my opinions at such a time through fear of giving offense? I should consider myself as guilty of treason towards my country and of an act of disloyalty toward the majesty of heaven, which I revere above all earthly kings. Patrick Henry at the Second Virginia Convention, March 20th, 1775, at St. John's Church.
Just a little note, what we do at all Moms for Liberty meetings and events, we always start off with what we call a Madison Minute, named after James Madison, the father of our Constitution, and it's just a quote from one of the founding fathers. So thank you, Bree, for that Madison Minute, and Katie for the beautiful prayer, and Norm for the great rendition of the national anthem. Now I'm going to turn the stage over to Tiffany Justice. She is the other co-founder of Moms for Liberty. She is a former school board member, like myself, who served from 2016 to 2020 in Indian River County, Florida. She's a mom. She's a wife, a mom of 4 kids that are all in public school. She might tell you a little bit more about them. She is passionate about kids, about public schools, about education, about liberty, and I am proud to call her my partner in this venture. Welcome, Tiffany.
I'm so excited that you all joined us this evening. Thank you for coming. As Tina said, I am a mom of 4 and did serve on the school board. So my kids are 17, 14, 12, and 11, 1 girl, 3 boys. And serving on the school board, unpacking all of those backpacks at home, right? And then serving on that board and getting to see, as Tina and I say, behind the education curtain was really enlightening. We started Moms for Liberty because we saw parents were stepping up and speaking out during the pandemic, but school boards were retaliating. They were hurting our children. They were keeping our schools closed. And people ask me often, what were parents the most upset about? Is it the curriculum? Is it the closures? What was it? And I think really beyond all of the single issues, it was that when we finally came to have our voices heard and spoke to our elected officials, they shut us down. They ignored us. They told us that what we were saying wasn't true or it didn't matter. And these are our children. And so we say at Moms for Liberty, we will partner with our children's schools, but we do not co-parent with the government. We hope this town hall will be the first of many that we get to hold, giving parents a voice. And I have in my hand a book, and I want to read a little bit of it to you. Phyllis Schlafly wrote the foreword for this book, and I'm just going to start and read a little bit. This book was the inspiration for this town hall, to hear from parents, because our government used to want to hear from us. Phyllis writes, a remarkable real-life drama took place in 7 American cities during March 1984. Hundreds of parents traveled to one of 7 locations to testify at U.S. Department of Education hearings on proposed regulations for the Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment. More than 1,300 pages of testimony were recorded by court reporters as parents, public school teachers, and interested citizens spelled out their eyewitness accounts of the psychological abuse of children in the public schools. They related how classroom courses have confused school children about life, about standards of behavior, about moral choices, about religious loyalties, and about relationships with parents and with peers. Sounds a little bit like today, doesn't it? 40 years later. There is no good way to summarize the anger and disappointment expressed by these grieving parents about what is going on inside public schools today. Each testimony should be read itself to learn the specific facts of what has actually happened and to hear the authentic expressions of parental love overlaid with indignation at what is being done in the name of education. The testimonies, however, could be, I'm going to actually skip ahead a little bit, sorry. These hearings explain why the American people are so dissatisfied with schools today. These hearings explain how schools have alienated children from their parents, from traditional moralities such as the 10 Commandments, and from our American heritage. These hearings explain why children are so emotionally and morally confused, and why, in the apt colloquialism, they need to search for their identity. This is 1984. These hearings explain what children have been doing in their classrooms instead of learning to read, write, spell, add, subtract, and the essentials of history, geography, and civics. These hearings explain how children learn in school to be sexually active, take illegal drugs, repudiate their parents, and rationalize immoral and antisocial conduct when it feels good in a particular situation. These hearings speak with the thunderous voice of hundreds of parents who are angry at how their children have been emotionally, morally, and intellectually abused by psychological and behavioral experiments during classroom hours when parents thought their children were being taught basic skills and knowledge. Parents are indignant at the way that educator change agents spending federal tax dollars have used children as guinea pigs for fads and experiments that have been substituted for real learning. 40 years later, and our education system is still failing our children. This has to stop. Enough. So what will be different today than 40 years ago? Moms for Liberty is building an army of parents across the country. We are unified. We are unified, we are educated, and we are empowered. And we will not stop until we reclaim public education and right the ship of America. There is a whole new class of politicians that are rising up to help us save our country. These are not career politicians, people that have spent 40 years on a path to the White House, but real people, moms and dads that are concerned about the direction of our country and are getting engaged and involved. Allie Beth Stuckey spoke at our national summit, and she said, politics matter because policies matter because people matter. And now we're going to hear from some people that get to make the policies. And we're going to talk to them about the opportunities that they've had to make policies and the changes that they know need to happen if they're elected. I'd like to welcome everyone to the stage, and then I'm going to give each person a little time to talk about themselves and some of the things they've been working on. We'll then have some questions, and I hope we get a lot of feedback from the audience because we really want to hear from you. First, I'd like to introduce Senator Lana Theis, the Senate Education Chair. Representative Pamela Hornberger, the House Education Chair. Jim Runestad, a member of the Senate Education Committee. Senator Runestad, thank you.
Get up here without stepping over.
Nikki Snyder, who is a member of your Board of Education. Nikki's been doing something right.
Yes, she is.
Welcome to the stage, Nikki.
She's
And
a word.
finally, Tudor Dixon, candidate for Michigan governor. I want to be clear and say that invitations were extended to many different elected officials, and regardless of party, Democrat, Republican, unfortunately, there were a lot of no responses, including from Governor Whitmer. So it's concerning when your governor doesn't want to hear from parents. Let me just make sure. Oh, it's on. Okay. So I'm just going to give everybody a chance to kind of introduce yourselves and talk a little about what you're working on. Why don't we start with you?
Sure. I'm Nikki Snyder. I've actually been serving you on the State Board of Education since 2016. Locally, I was involved before, and truthfully, if I can be very honest with you guys, the reason why I ran for State Board of Education relates directly to how difficult it was and still is to run for your local school board. And so I just want to say hats off to those of you who are doing so. And I really do think we're going into a season and a change when it relates to running for local school boards. So everybody that's in the room here tonight that's super excited and energized, please be knocking doors for your local school board candidates.
We'll just go right down the line. Tudor, why don't you go ahead?
I'm Tudor Dixon. I'm running for governor. It seems like the most important thing we can do is make sure that that one person that either signs or vetoes is on the side of parents. That is key. And I'm a mom. I'm a mom of 4 also. I have 4 kids, 4 daughters who are school age. That's why this cause is so important to me, but also because I want to make sure that we take care of all of your children as well. As a state, we have abandoned our kids when it comes to making sure that they can read. We have nearly 60% of our 3rd graders failing their exams this year. We have left too many kids behind in this state. We have a huge opportunity to make sure that we lead in education. We see other states that have gone from the bottom 10 in the nation to the top 10. Right now, we're headed toward the bottom 5. If you look at where our stats are, we can make sure that we're headed toward the top 5, but we got to act now. And we hear these other politicians giving you lip service about, I'm putting money into education. Gretchen Whitmer may be putting money into education, but when you ask her, well, what do you think about our kids actually being able to read, she's completely silent. When you ask her, what are you going to do to stop sex and gender theory in our elementary schools, she goes silent. So we need somebody who's really going to fight for our kids.
Well, my name is Senator Jim Runestad, and I'm so excited to be sitting next to our next governor here in the state of Michigan. And my parents were both teachers. My father was a principal. My sister was a teacher, so I come from a long line of educators. I have an education degree from Central Michigan University. And when I came out of school, there was literally no teaching jobs, but I got a job where I was going and taking over classrooms in about 110 schools per year, talking to about 10,000 seniors. And so it gave me a real opportunity to get in class after class of every kind of class you can imagine and get real experience. So when these teachers say, well, you don't know what it's like to be in a classroom, I've been in more classrooms than most of these teachers have ever been in. And what I really see is such a major problem today, and we ask what I'm doing. I was working, as many of you know, on recruiting school board candidates last year because I knew that if this continues, if the education system gets away with gutting the parents' rights, removing the parent from the school system, that our state is going to come into an absolute, not just economic collapse, but a moral collapse. I'm seeing it across the board. Last night I was at the Dearborn school board meeting, and it was an amazing event with about 1,100 parents, and these were mostly Muslim parents from the Dearborn system, and they loved their kids. They emphasized over and over again, they absolutely love their kids. And the other side was trying to say, well, this is all about hating LGBT or hating the parents. And they said over and over again, we have nothing against the LGBT community. We're completely fine with the LGBT community being in the school. What we object to is these vile, horrible books that were in the school system. And they honored the teachers. They gave a standing ovation to the teachers. It was a non-attack on the teachers. The speakers that came up against them were not telling the truth. And it was such an exciting thing to see these parents say, what we do not want is sexually inappropriate books, and that is all we're asking for. There was one of the gentlemen read an excerpt from one of these books. It was so horrific, it was so vile, that he could hardly read it. He said, I'm a 42-year-old dad. I have to read this to you. It's so horrible. I can't believe I'm doing this. But you need to know, every one of us were sickened, except in the school boards and all this is fine. But these parents were just sickened at the level of debauchery that is being fed to these kids, and that's what they wanted out of school. So that's what I'm working on.
I'm Senator Lana. I chair the Senate Education Committee. This has been a battle. Listening to Phyllis Schlafly, wow, 40 years ago, and it sounds exactly like where we're at right now. I want to tell you thank you for inviting me. I want to honor you guys for stepping up. There is nothing more powerful than a parent who is engaged in their child's life, making sure that what's happening with their education is the best possible education they can get, and that it's not indoctrination, but that it is education. And so I honor you for stepping into that window. I am so excited at the opportunity of having a governor that will sign bills that will prohibit boys from playing in girls' sports. That will prohibit the CRT and the 1619 project that will actually, yes, that will allow the libraries to contain edifying material for our children, and that we won't have to argue with why this sexually explicit material needs to be removed. That shouldn't even be a question. I became an activist a while ago. For me, it was trees, and I'm like, wow, I used to think trees, making sure you owned your own trees was really important. I had no idea that somebody would be trying to take over control of our children, and I am so grateful that you're in this fight with us. Thank you.
I'm Pamela Hornberger. I am the House Education Chair. I had the honor to be the House Education Chair for the past 2 terms. I also serve on the House K-12 Appropriations Subcommittee. I am a former teacher. I taught art in the East China schools for 23 years. So when I first got elected, none of these people thought I was conservative. But I'm honored to say I'm one of the most conservative legislators to have served in the state legislature. I taught elementary art for 20 years, and then I taught middle school, high school art for the last 2.5. I ran for school board in 2010 because my elementary daughter was in school. My former husband was a teacher, and I just decided that there were some things I thought could use improvement in my local school district. So I ran in 2009 and lost because I had no idea what I was doing. And then I said, nope, I'm gonna run again. And so I got some help, figured it all out. I ran in 2010 and won. I served for 6 years on the L'Anse Creuse Public School Board. Thank you. It is a very rewarding and very thankless job all at the same time. And what I can tell you if you're running for school board is that you need to ask a lot of questions very calmly, make sure you keep track of them, and hold people accountable. One of the most interesting things that happened to me on the school board, and I heard someone else talking about this earlier, was having to FOIA information as a board member.
Yeah.
So public information. I had a superintendent as a board member who would not give me public information because she didn't want it out in public. And so as a board member, I was like, well, this is public info. I literally threatened her that if I have to FOIA it, I'm going to post it publicly. And I had other board members telling me I wasn't allowed to do that. So you're gonna run into some brick walls, don't give up. Be the loudest voice for the students and the parents in your district. Do not give up. When I got to Lansing, I felt like I was the only one. Sorry, but I mean, serving on ed, you didn't serve on ed with me in the House our first term. I felt like literally I was the only one in Lansing that was advocating for students. You get to Lansing and you have groups, ed groups, whoever, everybody's got their hand out, and no one is worried about the kids. No one is worried about accountability in education. No one is worried about student improvement. We've been told in Michigan for the past at least 7 years that we have this top 10 and 10 plan. Well, every year we've gone down. Yet every year our schools have gotten more and more money. So it's not about money. It is about accountability. And once we elect Tudor Dixon governor, we can literally transform public education in the state of Michigan. And we have a moral obligation to do that. There are over, thank you. There are over 1.4 million students in public education in Michigan. So we can claim we want to blow it up and everyone should homeschool, and that's great. If you can homeschool, do that. No one's telling you not to do that. We should have every option for every child every day. But we have an obligation to educate all of our students. And when we look at the literacy rates around the state, in districts that received an astronomical amount of money and then an astronomical amount of COVID dollars on top of that, and they still have no literacy plan, like something's wrong, and you guys are the people that need to start speaking up and going to school board meetings and holding people accountable, and I am so grateful that you're willing to run for office. Oh, and by the way, I am running for office.
Her too.
So I'm term limited in the House, and I'm running for Senate.
Thank you for that. I'm going to start. We're going to talk about how did we get here in Michigan. What's the current state of parental rights? Why are parents not being respected? Who wants to start?
Well, I can give you an example from just Return to Learn. When we put together the Return to Learn plan, when we were trying to get kids back in the classroom after COVID, I sat down with our policy person as we're crafting these bills, and we decided that we were going to put in there, because we kind of had to wedge the governor in order to get her to sign them, but we did put in there that school boards had to come back every month and re-vote on their plan. They had to reaffirm their plan for the month moving forward. We weren't just going to let them vote on a plan and then go for a whole year with kids being either out of the classroom or moving back and forth. So we made sure that every month they had to vote, and what we felt was that would give parents the opportunity every month to check in. Like, why do my kids still have a mask on when all of the other districts don't? Why are we still virtual when our neighbor district isn't? And that happened to me in Macomb County. Chippewa Valley, I know there's people here running for Chippewa Valley Board. They kept their kids out of school for months and months, and right next door in L'Anse Creuse, where I live, kids are going to school. It was absolutely ridiculous. And so you have parents questioning that. So we made sure when we set that policy up and we wedged her into signing it, that we put in place something that parents would at least have the opportunity to go back every month and say, wait, we don't agree with this. Why are you doing this? So we've tried to have that accountability, but that's one of the things I think that we did well, trying to get kids back in the classroom. But in other districts, it didn't work. I mean, I had to beat her up over getting kids in Detroit and Flint back in school when the rest of the state was in school.
And Ann Arbor.
Yeah, and Ann Arbor.
But it goes way back. It goes back much farther than that, and I believe it lands on the Department of Education, not our conservative members, because they're working so hard to make it work. The Department of Education should be a supportive body. They should be coming in and giving guidance to the educators, giving guidance within the curriculum that helps to actually educate the kids. And you probably all saw recent videos that came out from the Department of Education explaining to our teachers how they can keep very vital information away from parents. These children are at risk, they're at high suicidality rates, and these teachers are being coached for how to keep this information away from the parents, and it's coming from the top down, from the Michigan Department of Education. So back at the beginning of the top 10 and 10, the MDE was there. And what we find in the legislature is that every time we try to push something that's going to help the kids, we get all kinds of pushback from the bureaucratic elites. It's not the teachers, but it could be the unions, and it could be MDE. So how many of you think you need to know how to balance a checkbook? Show of hands. Trying to pass financial literacy was like pulling teeth without anesthesia. These people were unbelievable, and MDE was initially opposed. The bill's sponsor, Diana Farrington, worked her rear end off to get people on board with it, to just get them to neutral in order to get financial literacy passed. Of all of the things that your kids need to know, using money is probably on the top of the ticket right there. So we're working against an established group that doesn't have our children's thought, that aren't holding our children first. And so that is the primary issue that I see.
Yeah. So Tudor, what can be changed? We're talking about the bureaucratic state, right? And the control that they have. I, as a school board member, Tina and I both saw, and oftentimes school board members are all too happy to abdicate their authority to bureaucrats, so they don't have to actually make decisions. That unfortunately sometimes does happen. And so what do you see that can be changed regarding parental rights? Parents are a huge driver of student success. The fact that we're not rolling out the red carpet for them doesn't seem to make sense.
Well, there's a lot that we can do. We've already rolled out our Parents' Right to Know Act, which would be, you can see what's happening in your child's classroom on the school website. You should be able to see the curriculum. You should be able to see what books are in the child's classroom, what trainings the teachers had, what books are in the school library, and you shouldn't have to pay for it. It should just be there for you. We are also talking about a similar law to what you're seeing in Florida, where we are not going to have any sex or gender talk before 4th grade. And we want to make sure that parents are involved in education. The reason for the Parents' Right to Know Act is so that parents know and then they can engage. Because right now, parents are being locked out. It's not just that. Oftentimes when you have to show something, if it's something that you don't want parents to see, you might stop doing it. And that's really, we want accountability. I saw parents from Loudoun County this morning on Fox talking about this being a true culture war right now. But why are we having a war with education? And you know, when you look at these other states, some of these other states are in a war, but at the end of the day, their kids can read. Gosh, Michigan's really in trouble when we look at Michigan. We have just received our scores back from the spring, and nearly 60% of our third graders failed reading and writing. So we're calling for the schools to go back to basics. In Michigan, we do have a separate Department of Education. So you've heard me come out and say, I'd like to see the people vote to have the Department of Education beholden to the governor, to have to report to the governor. That's not the case right now. We have this separate Department of Ed who reports to no one. That's a catastrophe in the state of Michigan, because there's no way for the elected officials to go to the Department of Ed and say, you got to cut this out. I mean, look at the situation that we just had with the state superintendent. We've got 2 Board of Ed members saying it's time to resign. Michael Rice is going, I'm going to double down. I'm going to make sure these videos are training teachers. I'm going to make sure that parents are being kept in the dark about what's going on with their kids. But think about just look at the debate last night. How many times we talked about safety and making sure our kids are safe, and what can we do to make sure our kids are safe? Here you have the state superintendent in the Department of Ed saying, if this kid is considering self-harm or harming someone else, don't tell mom and dad. That's what he said. We already know what happens when kids are in that situation. We have a very dangerous situation going on with this state superintendent. And there's nobody that can say, you're done. That has to change, because now we know. Now we see what this is. I don't understand why this culture war is being waged on our kids. I really don't get it, because as I said earlier today when we were at another event, I've got 4 kids in school. School's hard. Kids are already dealing with a lot. There's a lot that you've got emotions with friends, you've got to make sure that you are studying, you got to get your homework done, and you've got tests. And the fact of the matter is, my kids get a little worked up every time they have a test, because it's a test. They know they have to get a grade on it. Why add more to the mix, this drama? I tell a story about when I first decided to run for governor, and I feel like I'm going to fall off of this at any time, so if that happens, just warning you in advance. But when I first decided to run, I sat the girls down and we said, I'm thinking of running for governor, and my twins were 7 at the time, they're 9 now, and one of the twins looked at me and she said, well, if you do this, will a lot of people hate you? I know, we were like, well, hopefully less than 50%. But here's the situation with that. A 7-year-old gets politics like that. These kids are growing up in a different world than we grew up in. There's so much information coming to them anyway. There's so much social information coming to them from all different aspects. I had a little boy come up to me at an event. I think we were in Shiawassee County, and this little boy came up to me and he said, I'm 10 years old. And I mean, he was 10 going on 30. Definitely, at least 30. Comes up to me and he goes, I'm 10 years old and I watch this show on YouTube. He said, it's a kids program. And I'm like, okay. And he says, and I told my dad the last time I watched it, I saw 10 more minutes on rape and incest than I saw of my actual program. He said, shit, this governor's really beating you up. And I thought, there's a lot to unpack from this conversation. But here's a 10-year-old kid. And it really hit me hard, because I thought the world our kids are growing up in is different, because even when I was a little kid, those political commercials, first of all, they weren't this bad. But they also weren't in the cartoons. When kids were watching TV, they weren't seeing these nasty attacks. There was more control. There weren't these low blows that went to kids, and certainly they never talked about rape and incest with little kids. You know, because that is just a whole nother can of worms that your kid is going, well, what are these words? And then they're coming to talk to you about it. And it's a different time. So I look at our schools as, gosh, that better be a safe place for 8, 7, 6 hours a day, however long they're there. That better be a safe place where they are learning things about what bugs are outside, what happens when the leaves change color, how to do their times table, how to pronounce words, how to read, those things that curious minds need to absorb at that young age. And the thing is that when you're a parent, you're reading these books all the time about your kids because, you know, a lot of times when you are a parent, you want to know everything you can about why are they doing this, you know, how to get your kid to stop doing that, or why is your kid curious about this, how many times can your kid ask why? All of these books, and you're reading about your child, and they're telling you constantly, you have until 3rd grade to, you know, once they're 5, they've learned half of their stuff. And then once they're in 3rd grade, they've got to read. And you just see how those young minds are absorbing so much information so quickly, and they're picking up all of the things that are happening around them. And what we want them to be absorbing is curiosity about science, curiosity about math, curiosity about reading, and getting those basics early on. Because when they're getting the culture, it's causing anxiety. And we don't want to see that in middle school, and what that's going to manifest into in high school. They need to have that strong foundation of the basics.
Yeah. Nikki, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, just briefly. I too may fall off this stool. I would just like to make sure you notify the short girls.
I know. I'm like, I have no place to put my feet.
No, I would just say that the how did we get here conversation, really, we have to think deeply and remind our kids, remind ourselves, what country are you living in? You're living in America. What is the form of government that you live under? We live under a democratic republic. And when you contrast our government with other governments around the world, this is the natural progression of what we've seen in those governments that seek to take control and have power over the people as opposed to of the people, by the people, right? That this is where we're at, and this is why we're there. This was decades in the making, and all of the nuanced realities and policies that come with it is a result of that. So if we aren't daily reminding ourselves and our kids, you live in America. We value freedom. We value liberty. And that's why we're here. And I would just say that honestly, if we're not really targeted about that conversation and having it as often as we need to have it, the culture war will carry on, and it will have an impact on the freedom and the liberty that we live here.
I want to make sure that we get time for questions and we get to hear from everyone, but I want to dig in a little bit. Proposition 3, you have the attention of the nation. Let's talk about Proposition 3. Who would like to give us an overview a little bit about Proposition 3, but then about some of the hidden dangers? Because at Moms for Liberty, we know that every parent has the fundamental right to direct the upbringing of their children. And the government needs to respect that. But we are seeing every day that a wedge is being driven between the parent and the child in America's public schools. Proposition 3 really opens the window to parents not being informed about what's happening with their children, but I don't know if every Michigan citizen knows that. So Jim, Tudor, Lana, anyone, Pam, who would like to take that to start to talk a little bit?
I am happy to start. So the language starts every individual. Every individual. There's no differentiation for adults only. It's everybody, including your kids. It goes on to speak to having a fundamental right to make determinations about their reproductive freedom, and then goes on to describe things like sterilization. So that means, I'm not a lawyer, I'm just reading the language. Your 8-year-old or 10-year-old child has the ability, a fundamental right, this is constitutional language and therefore overrides statute, has a fundamental right to make a determination to do something to themselves that will cause them to be sterile for the rest of their lives. So you spoke about the fundamental right of parents. No, Prop 3 takes that away. It overrides that. It speaks to way more than abortion. If they wanted to just speak to abortion, they could, and they didn't. If they wanted to just speak about adults, they could have, and they didn't. So for example, if your child is given puberty blockers, nearly 100% of the children that receive puberty blockers go on to take cross-gender hormones. Within 3 months, nearly 100% of those children are sterile. Puberty blockers are not benign. Cross-gender hormones are not benign. This is a very serious issue. It happens to mention abortion, but it goes way further than that. It is a parental rights issue, and Proposal 3 takes away your ability to make those determinations about your children, and it places it in the Constitution, making it nearly impossible to correct.
And the counselor can do it.
So, yeah, I was going to say, and think about it. Right now in a school district, if someone wants to take your kids on a field trip, you have to sign a permission slip. A staff member from a school would be able to take your child, and you would have no recourse for anything, for birth control, for an abortion, for hormones. You'd have absolutely no recourse. And if they take your child for an abortion and something goes wrong and your child dies, oh well.
Take them out of school with no permission.
Yes, but if they want to take them to Greenfield Village, that you got to sign a permission slip.
So under Proposal 3, there's no ability for you to go after them for having harmed your child, and it's just a medical professional that they're receiving this advice from. Read not a doctor, a medical professional. So somebody who has a fiduciary interest in causing them to make a decision in opposition to their health, and the parents may not know and certainly don't need to give their permission.
A veterinarian or an eye doctor can perform any procedure.
Medical professional. Now again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm telling you this is my reading from the plain reading of the language of the proposal. I recommend you read it too. I recommend you talk to lawyers. But that is what the professionals are saying.
Yeah, that's my understanding of my reading it as well. And I'm just thinking, as Lana was talking, how many times my daughter would be at school and I get a call from the office and they say, well, Kayla has a headache. Do you want her to come home? No, just give her aspirin. No, you have to come and physically give the aspirin. We can't give the aspirin. Now, I have to be there for the aspirin, but on an abortion or complete altering the gender, that I would not even be notified about. So it's just an absolutely horrendous bill. And I was reading about Vanderbilt University. I don't know how many of you read that whole debacle. These videotapes of that university basically saying that this is something that we can make lots of money on. And not only that initial operation, but we can make lots and lots of money on ongoing for the rest of their life. And the entire focus was on money, money, money. And eventually they took all those videos down, but they were up there publicly.
And just to be clear, this is an issue that states are dealing with, Republican governor, Democrat governor, it doesn't seem to matter. In Florida, where I'm from, I'm familiar with 2 different cases that students were put into a social gender transition program at the school without the consent or knowledge of the parents. In one case in particular, a little girl tried to commit suicide in the bathroom when her parents came to the school, and the child was in the middle of being Baker acted, being taken into the custody of the police because she was a danger to herself. The parents said, "What is going on?" That's when they found out that gender transition plan. And when they asked, why haven't we been told, they were told they were Catholic And because of their religion, it was assumed they wouldn't affirm. And so that secret was kept from those parents. So the idea that children are struggling with these issues and not being given, and parents are, and children too, not being given the opportunity to have parents involved in that decision-making process. Tudor, how do we get to a place in America where parents, the state thinks they know better than parents know for their children?
Well, I mean, that's once we saw what our own Department of Ed did, we saw people doubling down, even pundits and whatnot coming in and saying, people aren't understanding if you send these kids home and you tell their parents, then they're in danger. So this is a new thing where we're demonizing parents. But there's also this message to kids, if you do this, it's reversible. But it's not reversible, as we've heard. You know, we're having kids that are, you see the pictures of these kids that are having surgery at 13, 14, 15 years old. Think you can't get a tattoo, you can't drink, you can't smoke, but you're gonna go have a surgery like this, and that's not reversible. They tell you these things are reversible. How do you reverse that once you've had a body part cut off of your body? I mean, it's not. And then it's not even that it's not reversible. It's something you see every single day. You look at it every single day, and you've had these people that come out now and they're begging schools not to promote this because they're saying, you know, I was impressionable and I felt like this was the best way to find my place. My gosh, aren't we all looking for our place in middle school?
I'd like to meet, I continue to say, I'd like to meet the young girl, the young preteen or teenager who just love going through puberty. Especially as a woman. It's such a hard time in your life, right? And the idea that we're telling children that they're born in the wrong body is just wild.
I mean, there are always things that are hard, but the problem that we're talking about is that you're just adding different hormones to the body. You know, hormones are hard. Hormones are hard when you're going through other things too. I mean, we'd all love to not have to deal with some of those things, but.
So Jim, I'm gonna change. I wanna hear from people, but I've gotta ask you a question. Tina brought up the Dearborn dads. You brought up the dads. You're the only man on the stage. I've got to ask you, it seems like the moms are leading the fight right now in America. We are on the front lines of the culture war. The culture war is being waged in the classrooms with our children, and we want it out. But where are the dads, Jim? How do we get the dads out and speaking and standing up across America?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It was a real interesting dynamic because most of the time when I deal with children's issues, when I'm talking to groups of parents, it's overwhelmingly females. And in that case, it was 75% men. And they were so absolutely, I think they felt that it was their responsibility to be leading, to be involved, not being drugged behind, but in the front leading. That was the sense that they felt an obligation over and over again. They said, the most important job I have in my life is being a father, being the head of this family, being a person who is going to be protecting the family. And it was such an amazing event. The concern they had, not just for themselves, because they said a number of times, this isn't just Dearborn. This is the whole state of Michigan. This is going all over the state of Michigan. We're not just doing this for Dearborn. They said that a number of times. And the mischaracterization through that entire thing, over and over, speakers that would get up and say, this is because you hate the teachers. This is because you hate the LGBT community, over and over again, and constantly they're saying, we have no hatred for the LGBT community. We have no hatred for the teachers. We love the teachers. And again, there was a standing ovation, clapping for the teachers. It wasn't about that. It was simply that they felt that what was happening in the school with the school board, they said it over and over again, the school board is putting in sexually inappropriate material in the classroom that they felt culturally is going to be so destructive to their community. And I think there's a lot more dads that need to get up like the moms and start getting forward and start leading on this issue.
I say amen to that. Dads, if you're watching, we need you to stand in this fight. Nikki, I'm going to ask you, we're talking about the books. I've done, my goodness, I'm not sure between Tina and I how many interviews we've done on the books that are in these libraries across the country. And make no mistake, they are in almost every single district across the entire country. You've served as a school board member. You've now serving on the State Board of Education. How do these books get into our libraries and our classrooms, Nikki? What do you think is happening? Why is this happening?
So we have librarians that approve them, right? And we actually have legislation in the state of Michigan that protects them from any consequences, right? If a parent were to, say this is inappropriate, I don't want my child to be exposed to this. So there are a number of things that need to change, not just the culture of respect around the concept that maybe that's something you would expose your child to, but that's not something I would expose my child to. And we've just lost a really basic level of respect for each other, right? It's okay to disagree. It's okay to have different ways of parenting your children and bringing them up, different sets of values and beliefs. What's not okay is that you completely and utterly cross a line and a boundary and suggest that it doesn't seem to matter what I think or what you think or what anybody in this room thinks. I'm just going to do whatever it is that I think is right, regardless of what you have to say, and there's no consequences to it. So that's what we've seen at state board meetings and local school board meetings across the state, is parents showing up and saying, we want you to care again. We want you to go back to the time where you actually respected the fact that we had differences. And we're going to have to continue to show up.
And the parents want a voice. They have been cut out of the system. We've heard over and over again from the education elites that the parents really shouldn't be a part of the system. We had the Democrat Party tweeting something that was very antagonistic about parents thinking that they should have a voice in the system. I have a fundamental belief that you love your children more than a stranger, more than a teacher, more than a principal. They might really like your kids, but you're going to love them more, and so their best interest, that's your main focus. So for an education establishment to try to intervene in that space is extraordinarily frustrating. And to Nikki's point, you guys need to stand up. The local control is very, very real. For those of you who are running for school board, God bless you. Understand it's still an uphill fight. But also understand that not everybody on the school board is your enemy. So when you're going to have a discussion with them, what I want you to do is stop and think, what would change my mind? If I were sitting up in front of everybody, what would change my mind? So get them the information. They've been lied to. They think it's generic. They think it's just tangential.
We carry the books with us now. We show them to people. We absolutely do. My husband, he said, these books, what's in these books? And I showed him the pictures of the book Genderqueer. And he was shocked, and he said, Tiffany, you have to show this to every single person when you're talking about this issue, because they don't realize what's really in these books.
Right. And to piggyback on what Lana's saying, when I first got elected and we had a different state superintendent, I don't know if you guys remember this, but he actually went out and wanted to change the law about people that could serve on local school boards, and he wanted to change it so that you had to have someone who had a degree and a law degree. Do you guys remember that?
Yeah, I do.
And I was appalled, and it was a way for them, the elitist educator people in Lansing that are floating around, to keep normal, everyday community members off of school boards. They didn't want you making those decisions on behalf of your district. And I'll be the first one to say, having come onto a school board with an education background, I wasn't an expert. I wasn't an expert in all of the details of running a school district. So I did have to rely on my superintendent for things. But I also knew that to intelligently ask questions and demand that someone was giving me answers and that I wasn't being BS'd. But to see someone in Lansing step out there in a position of authority, he was our state superintendent, and want a law passed that would keep normal, everyday, tax-paying citizens off of a local school board in order to make sure that the people were better educated that we're serving was absolutely appalling. But that's what they think of you. That's how they view you. And we know that because we've seen them, even at the national level, come after parents who are speaking out on behalf of their kids. You know, they want to label you domestic terrorists. So it's not just at the national level. Those are our local leaders in the state and locally that would love for you not to have a voice. So just keep existing loudly and holding people accountable.
So speaking of giving parents a voice and speaking loudly, I'd like to take some questions and open up for comment if we could. We have a microphone, I think. Do you need Amy right here? Amy Hawkins. I just want to, if we can for a moment, pause and thank Amy. Please. We were connected to Amy early on when we were looking at Michigan and helping to start some chapters, and Amy is just a true champion for children and parents, and we are so incredibly thankful for her help in this event. It couldn't have happened without her help, so thank you very much, Amy, for everything. So if you have a question, raise your hand. Amy will come around with the microphone, and let's take some questions and answers. Just a housekeeping note. We are here to have peaceful, kind conversations. This was open to the public, and we accept and want to hear lots of different viewpoints, but if you're nasty or rude, we will ask for you to be removed. So on that note, Joyful Warriors, let's have some questions.
Hello, Miss Tudor Dixon. I'm your #1 supporter.
She's got a lot of those.
I do want to make a point that actually bothers me. I know you said there was a boy that came up to you and said about rape and incest. I think you were being set up for a 9, 10-year-old saying that to you by probably parents. But, you know, many people are not aware of this. It's like 1 million abortions a year, but maybe only half of 1% in that case. So people are not, you know, they're being misled by that, half of 1%. So I think it's important that people need to know this. There's over 63 million babies who died. This would have been grandchildren. I go to abortion clinic all the time, and I've caught, even Islam came here in this area. Literally, I even have it on my YouTube that they saying that he got the wife here, and now she's in there trying to kill the baby. He said he's going to take her back to her own country because, you know, so they're actually trying to not do it in Dearborn. They're coming in here and hitting this area so they don't get acknowledged. So this is really bad. This is getting very effective. So, yeah. So what I want to do is, what can you do to try to really emphasize regarding the abortion?
I think that what we need to remember is that there is no limit on the other side. Gretchen Whitmer was asked multiple times last night, where's your limit? Where's your limit? She wouldn't answer. So the extremist view is to have no limit whatsoever. I mean, we don't have a single state in the nation that has no limit, except for Michigan might if Proposal 3 passes, which is sad, but she has no limit. She's been asked multiple times, where is the limit? Her voting record shows she has no limit because, as I pointed out last night, she voted no on a ban on partial birth abortion. I mean, if you've seen any of those videos, it's pretty horrendous. So the point that we just have to make sure we let people know is you have a person in the highest position of office right now that is pushing to have no limits, abortion up to the moment of birth. That's pretty horrendous.
Thank you. I'd like to thank each of you for running. It is an important job that you guys are all fulfilling. As our constitutional republic, the government gets the power from the people, you know, and it's important that we all remember that our officials remember that, and we have elected officials that respect it. So I'd like to thank you all. At the beginning, you had read that passage from that book from 1984. And I'm astounded to see the similarities to where we find ourselves today. However, I think there's a few good things that have come about in the last 40 years that have changed. One, we have far more educated parents and adults than we did in 1984. You know, we're able to make much more sound decisions by ourselves, you know. Two, we have the internet. You can see everything that's going on, not just in Michigan, not just in your local area, but around the country and around the world. You know, so we have access to a tremendous amount of information, you know, that we can go, okay, this is happening here. Is this happening in my own community? And three, I think COVID has woken everyone up to what is going on in the school districts, in the local communities. And so I'd like to thank you all for doing it, and I hope that you continue your efforts.
We call that the lemonade. And when I was growing up, my mom always said, make lemonade. And so COVID was a lot of lemons. But the lemonade was that we woke up and we found each other. Who knew we were going to make so many new friends in our 30s and 40s at Moms for Liberty, right? But it's a beautiful thing, and you're right. You know, the age of information has allowed for us to be able to communicate. And we are communicating with each other. And I use the analogy of a bike helmet. We don't put a bike helmet on our child because they've been hurt before. We put a bike helmet on our child because we recognize that the potential is there for them to get hurt. And our moms and dads across the country are watching in other states. And we're watching Michigan. We're watching Prop 3, and we're worried for you, but we're worried for us too. Parents across the country, if it's happening in one state in our country, it can happen in other states too. And unless we're ready to start taking stars off of the flag, which I don't think anyone is, we better start paying attention and supporting states and parents like the parents of Michigan. So thank you for those comments.
I think you make a good point, though, because we've had many media say, well, have you seen this before? Have you seen this before in Michigan? And it doesn't matter. I've seen it in other states, and that's why it's the bike helmet. I don't want to see it in Michigan. None of the parents here want to see this. So we're going to stop it now and protect our kids, because that's what we do as mom and dad. And that's why we elect we the people. That's why we rise up and go into government, because of the things that we innately know as parents, as members of society. And we say, okay, we see something dangerous coming. I mean, if you see a car coming, you get your child out of the street. You know, we see that coming because we've seen it happen in Connecticut. We've seen it happen in Kentucky. We've seen this happening. We're going to make sure it doesn't happen in Michigan. But that you always get that pushback, like, it hasn't happened yet. And guess what? It won't now.
Absolutely right, because parents aren't going to stand by and let it happen.
Hi, thank you all for being here. I just want to say God bless you and thank you for what you do. And this is my first time at a Moms of Liberty event. I just want to say I have a question, but I was at my grandson's school with my sign that said, I do not co-parent with the schools, because of the fact of something they did, giving him a letter that he came home crying and upset that they moved his class, his teacher, and everything that he was familiar with the next day. And we just got the letter the night before. So I called the principal, and then they said there was nothing they could do. They had to do this quickly, and they didn't have time. I said, well, you didn't involve my daughter nor me, who's on his application for contact. And when I went up there the next day, I was ready, because I go to Washington and I march and I stand for liberty. I stand for everything that's right. And in no way will I let my grandchild, if I can go to Washington and march for other people's kids, I'm definitely going to come to the school with my sign and let you all know that. But I didn't pick it yet. I went in and gave him a chance, and he was standing his ground about this is what they had to do. I said, but you didn't include the parent. Mm-hmm. You did not notify any of us that this was going on. We didn't have time to do that. We had to get this matter done. It came down from whatever. And I said, but my question is to you, you didn't consider my grandson as special needs. He has autism. You're going to take a kid with autism and move him out of his environment, which that is a known thing you can't just do, you know, and think that he's going to be okay. I mean, he would be okay if we had to do that, and then you're going to put him in a class that's a 4th, 5th grade split. That's something he's not used to. they were doing really good up until that point to me, because he had a third grade teacher, Ms. Winchester, who did a phenomenal job with getting him back on track after being out of school in the second grade and didn't get any of that education through the computer. Because the kids with autism that doesn't work with all of them. And to me, my question is, what will you do to help the special need kids? What will you do to help all of these kids that with autism? What do you do, besides streaming them with everybody else, which we want them to be with their classmates? That's what his main thing, he was crying. They moved his friends. And it's like, you didn't take into account, number one, to ask his parent, would this be good? Number two, to see if that would be a good fit for him to go to a 4th grade split. And he needs to get everything he needs for 4th grade before 5th grade. And then understanding a kid with autism, that sends anxiety to another level. So you disrupting my household by doing that and not telling me. So to me, that let me see the bill that they want to pass to take control of our children was starting already. So what would you do?
Well, first and foremost, when we're looking at kids with special needs, especially autism, the governor, Gretchen Whitmer, vetoed funding for our autistic kids. Took out a lot of funding for different autistic programs. We have to hold her to her record and make sure she does not get another 4 years. Because she is not being honest. And I think you saw that last night. She's not being honest when she stands up there and she says, I'm here for families, I'm here for children. The vetoes tell a different story time and time again, whether it is vetoing funding for families that want to adopt, whether it's vetoing funding for autistic kids, or whether it's vetoing funding for women who are scared and need safe housing and they're pregnant. Why are these vetoes not being questioned? Why is the media not saying to her, whoa, this is pretty twisted. Why are you doing this? Why are you against the people who need the safety net? I mean, that's the one thing that we've always been known for as a country, is the safety net, to make sure that the people who need it most were there for. And she's just ripping the safety net away. Like, if you aren't exactly what I expect you to be, then I'm not helping you out. And that's what we're done with. And that's why it's so important to make sure that radical politicians that want you to live a certain way, that believe that they have the only answer, that believe that you have to be in an electric vehicle and the perfect home, they're done. The elitists, they're done. We know people, everybody looks different, everybody's household is different, everybody's school is different, every child learns differently, and we are treating everybody like they are going to be able to have the same life. This idea that everybody is the same and we're not going to see any differences is hurting our littlest people. Because I was talking to a family the other day, and they work in the Grand Rapids schools, and they fight really hard for these kids, and they said, you got to understand that these kids learn differently than the kids in other neighborhoods, because they're in certain cases, their parents can't read. And so the vocabulary that they know is a lot less than the vocabulary of a child whose parents are reading to them every night. There are differences that we have to acknowledge and say, how can we help these children to make sure that they have the best opportunity in life too? And that's not what we're seeing with Gretchen Whitmer.
So I have a question. Do you have an advocate? Do you have a special ed advocate? So here's what you need to do.
They agreed that he should be able to move because he's doing so well.
Now here's what you need to do. Here's what you need to do. So the team at school is telling you this is okay. If you don't think it's okay and your daughter doesn't think it's okay, get a child advocate. There are Michigan child advocates. They're not involved with the school system. They are outside people. It is someone who is going to come into that meeting with you, and I guarantee you, when you walk into that meeting with a child advocate, they are going to
take notice.
Well, let me tell you.
They're not going to be happy. And you are going to get exactly what you want, because that person knows the law. There is a really good person out there who, I'll admit, she probably doesn't like me, but she is a bear, and I will give you her name later, but you can Google Michigan Child Advocate. You need to take someone with you. They are experts in IEPs and special ed law, and I'm going to tell you every day, those schools will try time and time again to violate, to ignore certain things in your student's IEP because it's easier, it's cheaper, it's not a bother for them. It doesn't matter to them that your grandson is getting what he needs or what is prescribed in that IEP. Take an advocate with you, and you will see a world of difference. And I'm not talking about those people at the school. I'm not talking about the social work. You may like them. They are not advocating for your grandson.
For him, and I got him back in 4th grade.
I know.
He told me that we can't do this for
She got him back in 4th
So
grade?
next
but I got him back in 4th grade.
IEP, show up with an advocate.
Yeah, well, other parents might not know to do what I did.
They do now.
Find a Moms for Liberty chapter. They'll help you. Just a note on I don't know how many people know this, but I take the opportunity to share it often. Tina and I will actually be on Dr. Phil's show on the 19th. We filmed it already. It's airing on the 19th, and we were there to talk about parental rights. And I asked Dr. Phil, I said, Dr. Phil, did you know that 35% of the girls that were receiving treatment at Tavistock, which was the largest gender clinic in the UK, 35% of the girls were presenting with moderate to severe autism? 35%. So we're talking about a vulnerable population of children that must be protected, and no one is going to protect a child like a parent or a grandparent. So kudos to you. Well done.
So we had the greatest president of my lifetime who just endorsed you, Tudor. And I think the America First policies that were in place were very important, and I'm hoping that we're going to go right back to them after this election. I've written over 75 letters to my representatives and legislators in the last 2 years, and I've heard silence. So with a few of our representatives up there, Tudor with you up there, I'd like to know, do you see us coming?
Well, one thing I'll say is if there's ever a time that anyone says that my office got a call or request or anything and didn't get responded to, that's an issue for me that they know. And most of the time, there was a communication, but I don't know if maybe you didn't get in touch with my office. But I'm so excited with what's happening here in the state of Michigan with Phyllis Schlafly, what was written back in the early 80s. And you can see it's been ongoing. This isn't a new phenomenon. This didn't happen the last couple of years. It didn't happen the last decade. They've been working on this for decades and decades and decades, and they're exponentially grabbing the rights of the parents. And they were excited. They're getting too close to the cusp of getting every last vestige of rights from the parents, and then COVID hit. And then the parents started going, well, it's a little... What? They couldn't believe what they were seeing on the screen. I've heard from so many people. I was walking by, I was doing some stuff in the kitchen, and I heard this stuff I couldn't believe. And the parents were awoken, and that's what's happened. They were not aware of what was going on, and they are now awake and getting active. And I don't believe that it's going to end this cycle. We're going to win some school board races. We're going to lose some school board races. But I think the passion of the parents now is awakened. They're going to be involved cycle after cycle. And I think it's going to make all the difference in the world. So thank you.
Okay. Currently, I just went to a board meeting. I gave a speech. They wanted my son to watch a movie PG-13. He is 11 in 6th grade, so I said no inappropriate content, and they were forcing us to read the book, but it contradicts our beliefs. We're Christian, and there was profanity and utilizing God's name in vain, and they said, okay, well, there's nowhere for him to go. So my son has a D+ in English, but he's a 4.0 student. And I didn't let him suffer. I got another book from a better school, and he's reading an 8th grade level book, doing 10 vocab words a day when they're only doing 1 a week, but I'm fighting for him to get credit right now. So I just was wondering if you guys could remember my situation. I'm from Allen Park District, and it's the Allen Park School Board, and he's in Allen Park Middle School. So please just remember me when you go to office. I don't know if they're going to give credit, but I believe we do have victory in Jesus' name. And, you know, God over everything. God bless you.
Hello. So I'm going to make this really super easy and direct, and I hope you appreciate it. I think you'll be able to answer with a yes or a no. So I am the chapter chair of our Moms for Liberty in Isabella County, and we had created a resolution regarding sexuality and gender content in Michigan public schools. And Nikki, I want to thank you, you and Tom both, because you're both well aware of this resolution as I've spoke for the last 3 board meetings, so the last 3 months at the state board level. That resolution literally says, in the simplest form, if a class other than sexual education includes sexuality and gender content, that parents must be alerted and an opt-out must be offered with an alternative course to be given if the child is opted out. Do you agree with that or do you disagree?
I'll just start. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I support
everybody,
the resolution,
please, yeah.
right? I think that that's one of the major things that needs to happen next so that parents' rights are restored. And Bree, thank you for coming to the board meeting and for commenting. And I would just piggyback onto what someone else said. It is hard to see you specifically because the light is blinding, but we do see you coming. We hear you. You're here. And every month at the State Board of Education meetings, we hear everything you're saying. It's loud and clear. And again, thank you, and please keep it up.
Go down the line. Pamela, you want to tutor? I don't know if you guys would like to comment on that. I mean, we are seeing that. I was watching a video, and it was a group that promotes comprehensive sex education, which is the sex standards that are being passed across the country. And the lady said she was so excited because she was seeing that sexual education and sexuality was being woven into every single class, that they were finding a way to be able to discuss this in every single subject, and how exciting it was. And you know, of course, we sit there in horror and say, my goodness, this is math. Why is this in math? So, you know, you talk about getting back to basics. Is this part of that?
Well, that's absolutely. We want to make sure that we are age appropriate, that we're talking about things that parents know about. That's why I'm saying we want the Parents' Right to Know Act so that it can't even slide in, you know, because you can have those referendums and there's still going to be sliding things in. That's why it has to be out there for parents to see and have that conversation. Because if it's not out there, they're going to rename it. They'll put it in. Oh well, it was under the guise of this, and so that's why I feel really strongly that we need to know what's going on in our schools. Parents need to be involved. Just put a little sunshine, shine a little sunshine on the situation, and suddenly that's disinfected, right? So we want to make sure that parents are totally aware. My fear is that when you talk about, well, we're going to stop this, they figure out a different way to slip it in. That's why I want full transparency, full transparency.
Yeah, I absolutely would agree with that and probably go even a little farther. Somebody had sent me the original sex education law, I don't know how many decades ago, but it was very explicit that you are to have the sex education contained in the class with an opt-out for the parent and the students. But as you say, they're now infusing it across the entire spectrum and all kinds of classes. In Dearborn, they said, well, don't worry, parents, because we have an opt-out form. Your kid can't take the book out of school. These 7 or so books that they all found objectionable. And the parents said, no. I mean, you're putting stuff that is so inappropriate for all the kids to see. And then your kid is the one kid that can't get this book. It's something that the school board, I could tell, wanted those books. It was a line in the sand. They wanted those books no matter what. And all of the parents were in opposition. And it was completely inappropriate. And this is where the transparency is absolutely key. We need to know what is going on in these schools. In so many of the schools, they don't want sunshine. They don't want transparency. They want everything contained within a small cadre of the education system. So 100% I agree.
Don't you know, Jim, they're educators. They know better than you for your child. You didn't know.
Oh,
you didn't get that memo, right? Lana?
I thought her point was really great, and it's something that I have seriously considered. So we don't take our kids to films that are rated R when they're 5. We make a point, and we're very discerning to make sure that our children, the content that they're viewing, contrary to some of what Disney's done, but the content that they're viewing, we are filtering. And we're provided that information by the rating on the film. So how about we rate the books?
Oh, we're working on it.
We can use the same content standards right up front on the books, but there should be no question. The content that is in some of these books is so horrific that an adult has a hard time reading it. And for the parents out there, for the people out there who think we are exaggerating, I challenge your child to go in and take one of the books out of the library and bring it home and hand it to you.
Go to the bookstore and just buy. I mean, honestly, I don't even want the kids. I don't even want the kids being able to look at the book line.
And to that point, you have to have a kid that you're going to trust not to open the book. But
Pamela.
But labeling them, so we know what the actual content is within the book, based on the same standards that we use for film.
Yeah. And one of the things we have worked on, and I can tell you it's been very difficult, is just having curriculum transparency, so that every district would have to post the curriculum online so that it's available easily for parents to be able to see. And the pushback that we get, and I'm not talking about just the everyday stuff that a teacher's doing, but your basic 4th grade social studies curriculum, 3rd grade math curriculum. And having been in education, I know that those things are readily available. Most districts do use different systems to house those so that they're available for teachers, so it's just a matter of posting it online. It's not, when we ran the bill through my committee, the uproar was, you're asking teachers to do more. And it was not asking teachers to do anything. It was asking the school district to post the overall, 3rd grade math curriculum online. And you would have thought we were, pulling their teeth out. But that easy transparency that we should have to create a trust between parents and school districts is something that a lot of districts don't want to do. And so there is a pushback there, but it's definitely, that book that you're talking about, if your neighbor gave it to your kid, or your kids went to their grandparents' house and some neighbor gave it to, your parents' neighbor gave it to your kid and you came home, I think most everyone would consider it pornography.
It's disseminating pornography and it would be
yes,
illegal.
you would be arrested.
And children don't have unfettered access to the internet when they're at school. So I would challenge your district. I would say, what websites do you not allow children to visit? Why? Why not? Can they go to, what websites are not allowed? Oh, because you don't feel they're appropriate, but this book is. So there's a lot of hypocrisy going on around this issue, right?
Hello, I am Jess Mathiak from Michigan Save Our Kids, and I'm the president of Huron Valley Schools Parent Advocates. So I wanted to touch on 2 things, funding and test scores. It was mentioned previously, our scores have plummeted. They're the lowest they've been in 3 decades. Our ACT scores and our SAT scores specifically. My school district in particular has received $7.5 million in COVID relief funds from the CARES Act, the American Rescue Plan, as well as 3 rounds of ESSER funding. Our governor has now increased the per pupil funding to $91.50 per head. And with the last round of ESSER funding, only 20% of those funds needed to be allocated to learning loss. So what benchmarks and what can we actually do to hold our schools and our school boards accountable for maintaining not just the status quo, but making Michigan competitive in a global market?
Well, I will say off the bat that I really think that we need to focus on that 3rd grade reading. We need to, obviously we have kids that we need to get back on track, and that's why we've presented our tutoring plan to make sure that every kid gets 25 hours to get back on track, because our kids are woefully behind in many different areas. So all of our kids need to have the support to get back on track. Other states have had comprehensive tutoring plans. They knew that this was going to happen. Michigan is one of the few that didn't have a comprehensive tutoring plan, and now we're even further behind. So to get our kids back on track, that's key. But if we had all of our kids reading in 3rd grade, then can you imagine how much better they would do? How much better our scores would be across the board? The focus needs to be making sure that from kindergarten to 3rd grade, we are doing everything we can to make sure those kids can read. Because I think I said before, from kindergarten to 3rd grade, you're learning to read. From 3rd grade on, you're reading to learn. The fact that we keep missing that crucial step is where we're losing our kids all the way down the line. And this is something that I think a lot of people don't focus on. Michigan has tried to focus on and just keep passing the kids through and not abiding by that 3rd grade reading law. You have to understand that there's a lot of confusion over that critical point. I had a reporter ask me the other day, "You're really hung up on this 3rd grade reading thing." Well, yeah, of course.
5.8% of 3rd graders, I think it was, in Michigan actually qualify to be retained this past year.
Right. So you're really hung up on this 3rd grade reading thing. I mean, don't you think there are certain 3rd graders that just aren't going to be able to read? And I was like, well, which 3rd graders do you think shouldn't be able to read? And she's just really quiet. You know, we're at the point where we're pushing back on these people.
Yeah.
And saying, you know, find me the parent that's going to come to me and say, we're not into reading. Yeah. We're not doing that with our kids. You know, I mean, what are you talking about? Well, and she said, well, so you're saying that a school can't come to you and tell you that certain kids can't read. And I said, if a school wanted to come and say, we have children that absolutely have some reason that they can't read, come to me and give me a really valid reason. I mean, certainly there are cases where you have a child that maybe is not ever going to read for certain reasons if they have special needs or something, and that's not going to be their story. So few and far between. And we're not talking about those special cases. We already know those exist. We're talking about all of our 3rd graders. And it's like you're always brought the extreme case when you're talking, especially to the media. It's like, well, what about this? Well, are you not seeing that nearly 60% of our kids can't read, 90% in Detroit? I mean, the reality of this is you have robbed these children. They have no future. And so we pour over how are we going to improve public ed? How are we going to improve public ed? It starts in 4 critical years. 4 critical years. Focus there. Focus on that. Make sure these kids can read, because once they can read, everything unlocks in a different way. And all of a sudden, math unlocks in a different way. It's like a key to a very special place that we are all in, and we are not letting them be a part of that club. And there are politicians who don't care because they've never lived it, and they don't get it. And it's a better soundbite to go out and say, I funded it, but you didn't pay attention to where the root cause of the problem is and what the corrective action is.
I'll add to that, actually. When you shared some of the statistics and the data with ESSER dollars, it's really only 20% of ESSER $3 dollars. And the truth is, this is where our local school board candidates, I need you to go out once you get elected and dig into the dollars. Because we have some school districts in the state of Michigan that had already spent that money before it even came in, which means they did not spend it on learning loss for the kids that need it the most. You're their voice. You need to get elected, and then you need to be their voice. And if we're really going to do something about bridging this learning loss gap, the tutoring plan is what we need. We need high dosage tutoring for these kids that need to make up a big difference in a short period of time. And they need to be encouraged that they can do it. They need to hear basic messages that they can do this, that they can catch up, right? This is one of the DEM lines is unfinished learning. No. We're not going to hoist that onto kids' shoulders. This is not unfinished learning. They were robbed of an opportunity. And so we're going to do what it takes for them to learn to read.
And when we talk about, 3rd graders not being able to read and the percentage of kids that cannot read at 3rd grade, and specifically the Detroit Public Schools, I know when they stayed closed and Flint schools stayed closed, I went to war with the governor about that, to the point, pointing out in public that, putting out press releases that Flint schools are closed, yet the charter school right down the street is open.
Right.
Detroit public schools are closed, yet the charter schools are open. And in Detroit, so you know, 50% of the students are in charter schools. So in fact, I think it's more right now post-pandemic that are in the public schools. So public schools is about 49,000, charter schools is over 50,000 students in Detroit. Their parents literally get them to a charter school every day. And when we're talking about literacy and the astronomical amount of extra funding that Detroit Public Schools received, which was I want to say 1.3, 1.4 billion with a B, dollars on top of the funding that they were getting from the state normally. And you have a superintendent who, had he come to me, probably you, all of us, and said, I want to focus on literacy with that money for the next 4 years to make sure that every single one of my students that leaves my school district is literate, we would have all said yes. And that would have changed the course of our entire state, our region, our country. When you have that many people in Detroit, it benefits them to keep people illiterate. They don't care. When you have that much money and you could hire every reading specialist in the country and pay them a lot of money. Come to Detroit and help me teach my kids how to read. No one said a word. And we've got these kids down there that are suffering. And then the parents who decide to send their kids to charter schools in Detroit are demonized because they choose something that works better for their child. And it's a shame and it's wrong and it's morally outrageous that it's allowed to continue.
The Senate Education Committee actually invited the superintendents of both of those schools to come in and to answer for how they were spending their COVID money. The response, one of them was just no, and the other was no thank you.
So just a note, if you're serving on school board, you're running for school board, reach out to your community. Everyone has a role to play in saving this country and in reclaiming public education. Sometimes you can find unlikely partners in looking at your school district budget and helping you to dissect it and understand it. So reach out to community members in your community and ask them to help you to look at the budget and to ask questions. It may not be your strong suit. The budget is complicated and sometimes purposefully so complicated, so it's difficult to understand. But I promise you, you bring in your friend who's been an accountant for 30 years into the meeting like your advocate, and you say, my friend just wants to listen for a little while. He's got some questions he wants to ask too. He saw some things in the budget that don't make sense to him. Maybe you could help us. I promise you the answers start to change a little bit. Pamela, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
No, as a school board member, we used to have a few community members. We would have certain committees, much like we do in the legislature, that would meet, like a finance committee, and a couple school board members sat on it. And the assistant superintendent of finance would come in and BS us, and then we would be expected to vote on something the next week. And we had some community members that started showing up because those are open meetings, even though they're not posted. Those are open meetings, and you can't have a quorum at them, and you are allowed to come and show up and ask questions. And even if you're not running for school board, you can set up an ongoing, basically FOIA request where you get that board packet every time they have a board meeting. As a community member, you have a right to have that, and they can't really charge you for it. If it's being given to school board members, I know our district used to hand deliver them before they were online, but you have a right to see that information. And there's a lot of information in there if you really dig, but yeah, you really need to be on top of your local boards. And I know you talked about accountability. Once we set a budget and that money goes out, and even the extra COVID dollars that went out, that's a local control issue. That is a local issue when your board and your superintendent is deciding how funds going to be spent. And that's why we need good people at the local level to stay engaged.
Yeah. Hi, Tiffany. This is Tina, your co-founder. I know you can't see because of the bright light, but you have 20-something people in line, and we have about 20 minutes left.
Okay,
so
let's hear the questions.
Yeah, if we want to be able to.
I can't see her.
I know you can't. I know you guys can't see, so I figured I'd step in line and you don't have a clock up there. So about 20 minutes left, ladies and gentlemen, and you have 20 people that really want to ask you a question. So
lightning round. So we want to hear your questions and we want to hear your voice. So please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Tamara Carlo, and I'll be on the ballot for State Board of Education. Nobody has fought harder in the state of Michigan for the last 22 years to get rid of the indoctrination and to return academic excellence than myself. I know everybody's record in education in Lansing, and I thank you, those of you on the stage that have supported me over the years, and Tudor for joining the fight, and I am so excited to be on a bus tour with you, empowering families and protecting children, so thank you. I've been trying to get the party to do this for years. The question is critical. We're missing this. I wrote a bill, I co-authored a bill to get Michigan out of Common Core. It was adopted in 2010. Third grade reading proficiency was 75% before Common Core came in. Within 10 years, it was 44%. So we can talk about all the stuff we're talking about, but we're missing the point. My question is, will you support a bill to get us out of Common Core? I wrote a best in nation bill, 6 pages long, very tight. Followed all the other states with their fake repeals, made sure the wording was tight, voted best in nation bill. Would you support that bill to give Michigan's kids the best proven standards and tests the nation had before Common Core?
Well, I would want to look at it. I want to be honest. I have to look at what that would be and how our schools would transition. I've talked to a lot of our schools about what they're teaching. This whole word language is really hurting our kids. But I had a long conversation with someone the other day, and she said, the truth is, we need a combination of that and phonics, because phonics is not necessarily easy for a lot of kids either. And so how do we get rid of something without having the next thing in place that's really going to be, and that's why I keep going to, what is the root cause of the problem? And then what is the corrective action? And so I think it would be irresponsible for me to say, oh, I would sign something that would say get rid of something unless I knew exactly what our schools were going to do. And I want to be responsible about that and make sure that I know.
Yeah, the bill gave us the proven best standards and tests the nation had before Common Core. So that
We did it in Florida, so it's possible.
So it's my understanding that Common Core was adopted by the state school board. We don't adopt curriculum or standards as a legislature. That was adopted by the state school board. That's something the state school board can change.
Defund it through the legislature.
Defund curriculum through the legislature?
We tried to not fund Common Core standards through the legislature, and they let it go through.
Nikki, do you want to speak to that at all, the state board and their role in Common Core staying?
Yeah, I do. Vote for Tammy and Linda Lee.
Hi, I have a son right now in 4th grade here in Troy who cannot read. He is dyslexic. I know I've gotten a response back from Senator Runestad. He's amazing. But I would love to know if other people up there would be willing to put a bill out like other states, very bipartisan, it's happened in Colorado and Rhode Island, that will pull this curriculum that is hurting our kids. Most of the schools in Michigan are using Lucy Calkins, who also is super involved with the Common Core, and that whole curriculum is being pulled because it was given a failing grade on ed reports, and that's what most of the places in Michigan are using. So is there a way that we could get some support for that, and would you guys be willing to do that?
Yeah, I would like to share that these conversations are definitely starting to happen, even in a bipartisan manner at the State Board of Education. It's slow. It's as slow as the change was, and it's unfortunate because the destruction's already been done for at least a generation of kids. So back to what it's going to take for our kids to close that learning gap, which we've talked about here tonight.
There is a dyslexia package that's already passed out of the Senate, and Jim Runestad and I are both on bills within the package. It's bipartisan, and it would help to address and move away from the Lucy Calkins curriculum.
I just had a meeting on the bill package this week, and Michigan and all of the parents out here, usually when I ask how many parents have dyslexic kids or grandkids, hands fly up all over the place. Because it's up to 20%, it's about 20% of the kids have dyslexia.
Identified.
All states will either test all the kids in advance and then select the ones who have a reading problem, or the teachers will be able to see who's struggling, and then they get tested. All states but Michigan. Michigan doesn't do any of this. Michigan's the worst state in the nation if you're a dyslexic child. There's absolutely nothing. I've had so many parents come to Michigan and say, my God, my kid was getting all these resources and everything. Come to Michigan, there's nothing. Yeah, that's right, there's nothing. And there's a massive resistance in the education system in Michigan because most of the teachers were it morphs from look-say to whole language. Every time it's unpopular, they change the name. It went through about 10 different name changes when that was no longer popular. It's always the same thing. And basically, you don't learn phonics. You're just looking at a word. You're memorizing that with maybe a picture. And they also like that it doesn't allow kids who are very talented to excel. When you can decode, you could read to your heart's content. But if you don't decode, you're only as much as those few words that you have learned. And there's a lot of the education system likes the equity of that. They don't want any high progression. They also don't want to have to go back to school and start learning the sounds of phonics. So it's going to be a battle. It has been a battle every step of the way. I've been working on this since I got elected 8 years ago. And it's a constant battle with the education system to help these kids. If these kids get the Orton-Gillingham training and they start really getting the ability to decode, these kids, all of them can learn to read. They just need the help, and it's impossible to get them to do it here in Michigan.
Hi, my name is Kelly Duda. I'm a mom, a grandmother, and I'm also an educator, specifically an early childhood educator. So in early childhood education, the focus on learning or being a teacher is a little different. It's more developmental as opposed to curriculum. I learned both. So I would like to speak a little bit to the sexuality issues that are going on. So I can say as an early childhood educator with a strong psychological background that children are not developmentally able and capable emotionally, cognitively, or spiritually to comprehend and understand sexuality until they're probably in mid-high school. So any sexual content, whether it's same gender or opposite gender, is inappropriate. Now, as a grandmother, if I were to show my 3-year-old grandchild explicit information, Troy Police would come arrest me if I was caught. I'm a mandated reporter. If I have a child come to me and tell me that someone is sexually abusing them, I'm mandated to report it. Why, in the education system, is there a pass? There should not be. It is grooming, it is inappropriate, and it is evil. Evil. And I can see, hearing what you shared with us, I see hand in hand, keeping children uneducated allows them to be controlled.
Right.
And that has just come out the last 2 years with COVID. Like it was talked about earlier, we are a constitutional republic for the people, by the people. We are the taxpayers. We are worked for. So all of this dissatisfaction, remember, we're all paying for this. My question also is, developmental psychologists, I don't understand why they're not screaming from the rooftops saying young children are not cognitively, emotionally, spiritually able to handle this. I would say consult with them. Find them who are correct-minded, and consult with them. Have them speak on your behalf, because there are conservatives out there who understand and know that young children are not capable. They're going to be in therapy.
I'm going to answer your question. I'm going to answer that question for you, because I think what we saw was that the associations are truly captured in this country. And when you look at the American Academy of Pediatrics or the Psychiatrists Association, the APA, and when you look at some of the pressure that they are putting on doctors to not be able to speak, threatening their license. We saw that during COVID. We continue to see it. People just have to be more brave. Yeah. We have to stand up. We need their voices. We need to empower doctors to be able to speak up because they are being silenced, and it's really a scary situation.
Hi, my name is Jamie. I'm with Let Them Play Michigan. And I have been fighting these books. My whole life has been consumed with these books lately. And so I apologize to Nikki that I'm the potty mouth that calls in on all the meetings that you have to listen to. My question is, okay, so the law is definitely a problem. The law is why these schools are getting away with this. They're using a loophole that isn't really a loophole. I've taken these books and my three-ring binder to sheriffs across the state and state police and showed them and read these to them. And I've read them the law. And after I pick their jaw up off the ground, they say this is as black and white as it comes. If this isn't criminal, then I don't know what is. So now they're talking to one another and trying to figure out the next steps as to where we go. Because the law states plain and simple, black and white, you are not allowed to distribute or display sexually explicit material to minors. So why are the schools getting away with it? It's because of the loophole they're using that says, first of all, librarians are exempt. We need to change that law. Second of all, it says that schools can use these books if they are part of a state-approved program. So how are these sitting in the libraries as a program? They're not. So that's what we're going to go after. I have lawyers ready to take it on. I have the sheriffs and the police ready to take it on. So I want to say that Senator Theis has been my right-hand girl with everything I've ever done with education. I thank her until the end of time. And I want a commitment from the other lawmakers and from Tudor that we will get this law changed and not let the schools and the librarians use these loopholes.
And that's something that we said, if you can't read it at the bus stop, then it shouldn't be in the school. If you'd be arrested at the bus stop, then it shouldn't be any different because you're inside of the walls of a school. And we're going to fight for that as well, because it's outrageous, and anything that hurts our kids, takes away their innocence, causes them anxiety, is not necessary in our schools.
My name is Nathan Palm with the Great Schools Initiative. The law you're referring to, Senator Runestad, is MCL 380-1507. This is really, really important. It was brought in 1976, and it allows us right now, today, to opt out. This is so critical, okay? So that as a parent, the school has to accept a written opt-out from you for sex ed. So according to this law on the books today, the school has to accept this opt-out. Now, the Great Schools Initiative, we worked with our attorneys, with the Thomas More Society. We've come up with a really good opt-out form that includes the normal sex ed, but also what we call the rogue sex ed. All the other stuff, the books and the comments and the clubs and all these other things, they're illegal. These are serial violators of the law. It's an existing law that's on the books. Now, the great thing with this law is that it allows us to take action right now, so that there's an administrative and a legal process that can go on with that. So if you've got other attorneys, you want to call our organization, but the first step is to opt out. So will you, our leaders up in front, encourage parents to opt out right now with this? Get a written opt-out in to your school so that you don't have to put up with this. And when the schools violate it, then we go to battle.
We will definitely share that policy, but I will say, you talk about transparency in education and curriculum. I'll let you. The supplemental curriculum has to be addressed. The other things that are coming in, until we do that, it's like shoveling sand with a rake. So, as much as you can show the transparency in the curriculum that's adopted, great, but there have to be stricter controls on what teachers are able to bring into the classroom and expose children to.
Hi, my name is Ronald Dwyer. Again, I'm running for County Commission District 3 here in Troy. This is my district that we're in tonight. I'm going to try to make it real quick here so all these people can get their question in. Is there a way that you legislators, and first of all, I want to thank Jim Runestad and Tudor Dixon for reaching out to the minority districts. Jim Runestad has been reaching out to the Indian community, and Tudor today was out in the Chaldean community. These are communities that we're not reaching as conservatives and as Republicans. I don't want to take full credit of this, but down in Dearborn, my wife is Middle Eastern, and one of her, I would say, friend's daughters, and she calls her Aunt Lana, came to her and said, I'm learning all about all this stuff about sex and stuff. And this is Middle Eastern. This is very taboo because these families are very religious, and they're not supposed to talk about this stuff. So the girl said, told Lana, I don't know what to do. So my question is, how do we educate the parents down in different communities, Chaldeans, Albanians, Arabic people, to let them know that's going on? Is there a way we can pass a law that the parents have to have an agenda of what is being taught, and that the teachers must stick to that agenda? We talk about being opting out of sex ed. How can the parents ask to opt out of sex ed if they don't know it's occurring? So that's my question.
I've got a couple of points that I want to jump in with, Tudor, and then you can add in. Number one, we need transparency, and number two, we need a governor that will sign it. That's Tudor.
And that, I mean, that's essentially what we're saying with the Parents' Right to Know Act. It has to be there. It has to be accessible on the website. You go there. You don't just search for it. You go to your child's class. You see what the curriculum is. You see what they're going to be studying that year. And I've had people say, well, you're asking teachers to update all the time. No, at the beginning of the year, just it's not your lesson plan. It's your curriculum. Yeah. Show us what the plan is for the year so parents know.
Hey, hi, my name's Terry Carroll. I have grandchildren that I am thinking about our future. In fact, everyone here has somebody that they know that they love and care about. My thoughts are this. I believe in the KISS method. Keep it simple, sweetheart. Anyways, why don't we just raise a standard in our state? Let's raise the standard, eliminate that completely out of our schools, and if any of the teachers or superintendents or whatever wants to bring it into place, let's penalize them. Now, if I was in a job and I was working on a computer and I was looking at porn, I might get warned, then eventually fired. We need to somehow set up a system where we can penalize the teachers and whoever is involved with it, and then eliminate them if they keep on doing it.
Yes.
A question for Tudor. I have two quick questions for Tudor. I've heard you say a couple times that you don't want gender or sexuality brought up in schools before 4th grade. Why does it have to start in 4th grade? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a standard that we're seeing across the nation right now, because why should we be seeing it after 4th grade? In many classrooms in 4th and 5th grade, we start to talk about the differences between girls and boys, because that's when they start to go through puberty. We have to be able to have those discussions with kids, because not all kids are going to get that discussion at home. So you have to be able to talk about the differences in the human body. We don't want a law that would prevent those crucial discussions with kids whose bodies are changing. But we don't want that discussion or anything like that discussion happening before that age.
I think it has to be clearly outlined as well, just to be clear. Because when we're talking about the comprehensive sex standards, gender identity is part of that. And so, in Florida, we passed HB 1557, and it said up until 4th grade. I think part of that was just to show the ridiculously of it too, right? That we're talking about K through 3. When we looked at national polling on this issue, it was in the high 60s, 60%, I think it was like 67%. That was Democrats and Republicans. This is not a partisan issue, and we need to remember that.
And real quick, your views on how the COVID injection, experimental COVID injection was rolled out, and the mandates put on people tied to their livelihood, and in essence, what are your thoughts on medical freedom?
I don't think there should be mandates on, obviously we're seeing now that the news, they're coming out and they're saying this is a danger for men, young men up to 30, that this could be causing heart disease, causing heart failure, causing death. So and certainly look at our military. Those are the people that are in our military for the most part. So I don't believe that we should be mandating experimental drugs.
Thank you.
Hi, this question is for Tudor. How do you feel about completely abolishing the public school system? And maybe just go private, give opportunity to all these professors, teachers.
Our public school system is really critical. And we would be taking our public schools away from so many kids that desperately need them. We have to have a balance, and I am all for education freedom, But there are kids that don't have that option. There are kids that don't have parents that are involved, and they need that public school. So our public school systems are crucial. That's why I want to make sure that our public school systems aren't putting kids in a failed situation. That's what should be what our focus is. Making sure that if parents think that their child is going to be better off in a different school, that they have that option. But for kids that are going to be in that public school, they're not trapped in a failing school.
Thank you. Thank you. So I just want to thank our panel, and I'm going to end with one last question. I think we're good. I can't see, but I think the line is done. These are not partisan issues we've talked about tonight. We are being divided in this country every time we turn around, and we know we've seen critical race theory and queer theory and all of these other things that are being injected into the schools, that our children are being divided, and intentionally so. So just a last closing thought about, how can we bring people together? I look at the dads and moms in Dearborn and the Muslim community. I look at the Christian community. I look at the Jewish community. I look at different races. We're all parents, right? So as we move forward, how do we have conversations with people and help to create the space for them to understand and realize that we're all so much more alike than we are different, especially when it comes to these issues about parenting and parental rights?
I think celebrating differences includes the concept that we respect each other for having them, right? That includes not name-calling, not attacking each other's quality of character or their value or their worth when they don't agree with you. And when you leave here tonight, that would be something that I would hope you would do, even while you're fighting for your own right and freedom and liberty to express yourself and your deeply held beliefs.
I think what you said is, part of what you said is crucial. How do we have these conversations? We have conversations. Start sitting down and listening. We are yelling at each other right now in too many cases. We are so used to a world where we talk at one another. You have to hear what I have to say. I'm right, I'm gonna tell you this. Let's sit down and listen, because if we're listening, then the other side is gonna listen too. And if they don't listen, if they get up and walk away, that's when we have to take action. But there has to be a moment in time where we stop it's like Twitter wars in real life, what we're experiencing right now. If you own a business, you don't yell at each other and walk out of the room. If you're managing a team, you don't scream and swear at someone and then leave and expect them to be a good team member. We are all a team in this state, and until we start sitting down, coming to the table, and listening, and that's something that we have to teach each other. And my gosh, if we're going to yell at each other all the time, what are we teaching our kids? So it's time to listen. Mm-hmm.
I certainly would concur with the civility. There was on both sides yesterday, there were individuals who were incivil. There was not, I didn't see yesterday's signs, but I guess the previous one, there were signs that were inappropriate. Unfortunately, the media said those individuals, a couple, that's the whole group, and it was completely not true. And I think with this discussion, civility has to be there, but there has to be an understanding of who is in control. And so often I see school boards feel they are in control. These are our kids, and they're not their kids. They're the parents' kids. And you could see why parents get emotional. I remember last night when that parent was reading that passage, and the whole room, they couldn't believe something like this is in their school. They just couldn't believe it. And these stony-faced board members, it just seemed like nothing was going to impact them. That's why I feel so sorry for these parents that sit down with the school board and say, please listen to us. Listen to what our values are, what's important to us. And if there isn't that reciprocity, the only thing you could do is change the board. But it has to be done civilly, but again, I've told people if the board is not going to be transparent, if the board believes the kids are theirs and not yours, you have to change the board. Thank you.
I agree with that. You start with the golden rule. If someone was going to come to you and change your mind, what is necessary for that information? Generally, a public format is not the best way to go. You put me in front of a whole bunch of people and you tell me how wrong I am, it's going to be really, really hard for me to be humble enough to say, you know what, you're right, I'm wrong, and change. And I hope I'm using the plural me. You need to understand how people behave. Understand what it is that's going to move them, and then be kind and considerate, get them one-on-one, but you're right, if they are unwilling to listen, then that's not a position they're supposed to hold. Representation is the fundamental part of this government, and the best representation happens at the local level, and the most important representation happens with those who are directly overseeing your child's education. So that position is so extraordinarily important and underrated. And again, thank you to everybody who is running. Understand it's going to be difficult. People are extraordinarily passionate in this space, and they're not always kind. You'll get some thick skin. But if you can get somebody one-on-one, if you can call them up and ask them to go out with you for a cup of coffee, and then, Jamie, read them the book, right? They probably haven't read the book. They probably don't understand how deep it is. They probably think it's just a general introduction to the world. And these books are not that. And we're not asking for banning. We are asking for reasonable accommodations, and that the children are not susceptible to being taught things that are entirely inappropriate for them. We're doing this with the utmost respect for the teachers who actually want the well-being of the children. And we want to fundamentally change our system. The focus needs to be on education, not indoctrination, but education.
And I'll piggyback off of that, knowing lots of teachers that are still my friends, even though I'm a conservative Republican. We need to be able to partner with teachers, too, at the most basic level. You need to establish a trust relationship with them so that they trust you, and you need to, trust but verify, because they are the most important person in that school that's spending the most time with your child. Mm-hmm. So be their partner, first of all, and hold them accountable. If they trust you and they don't feel threatened, then I think you're going to have a good relationship with that person that's in the classroom with your child all day. But we need to remember when one of the gentlemen stood up and asked about doing away with public schools, that, like I said, there are 1.4 million Michigan students in public schools, and we need our public schools to be successful. If our public schools are successful, we succeed everywhere else. Every business in our state is stronger. Every community is stronger. We need our public schools to be successful. Not every parent is just obvious of what I talked about in Detroit, has the wherewithal, the means to take their child and put them in a charter school. So we need our public schools to be successful. And that starts with us at the legislative level, but it's most important at the local level because of local control. Mm-hmm. So you really, really need to stay engaged. Like I said, I lost my first school board race. I had no idea what I was doing. Run again. Reach out to people that can help you. Run again. Hold those people accountable. It worked in one of my local districts. It took 2 cycles. They had a horrible superintendent. But it took 2 cycles for them to be in a position where they could even start having the conversation about, this person is not moving us forward. The decisions that are being made are detrimental to our community and to our students. So keep running, keep being engaged, keep talking to each other, and letting each other, sorry, I'm getting dry mouth, and letting each other know what's happening, because if you're a working parent, if you both work, it's difficult to stay on top of everything that's going on in your community. But the most important thing you can stay on top of is your schools, because even if you don't have kids, even when your kids graduate and you don't have kids in your local schools anymore, it's detrimental to your community that your schools succeed.
Thank you for that. Thank you. So as we started saying, you know, I served as a school board member. Tina did as well. It was a wonderful experience. It wasn't always easy, but it was incredibly rewarding. I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a tremendous amount about the education system in our community. Run for school board. School board elections matter. America is a very special country because of many things, but we hold a value educating every child, and we mean that. Every child, not every country does that. And we have local elections, and we have local representation for school board. Not every country has that either. And so school board elections matter. If there is one thing you do right now, go out into your communities, figure out who's running for school board, talk to them, see what they stand for, ask them if they stand for fundamental parental rights. And I'll close with this. If you go to momsforliberty.org/pledge, you can see a parent pledge there. It's very simple. It says that you as an elected official or a candidate will stand with parents and protect and defend fundamental parental rights. You will work to enact and support policies that respect parental rights. Please take that pledge. I invite all of you to please take the pledge and then post it and let people know in your community that you've taken that pledge. Once the pledge has passed, there are resolutions that you can find on that page. You can, as an elected body, bring a resolution or a proclamation forward, and this resolution says that you respect parental rights, and you will use that as the lens with the work that you do in your own school board. So please, again, go to momsforliberty.org/pledge, check that out, ask your candidates, elected officials to sign it so you know who parents can trust in your community. Thank you to our panel for joining us this evening. Big round of applause. Have a good night.